The sharp edge of the silver tray cut into my palms as I gripped it tighter, trying to steady my trembling hands. Each step through St. Cecilia Medical Center's polished marble corridors sent a dull ache radiating through my lower back, where 16 weeks of pregnancy was beginning to show, despite my loose-fitting scrubs. The scent of hospital-grade disinfectant mixed with fresh lilies from the lobby arrangements, creating a sterile sweetness that made my already queasy stomach churn. I had been working as a medical assistant here for 3 months now, ever since I'd changed my name and moved across the country. The pay was modest but honest, enough to cover my tiny studio apartment and put food on the table. Most importantly, it was anonymous work. No one asked questions about my past, or why a woman with my medical knowledge was content filing charts and restocking supply closets. My supervisor, Margaret Walsh, had been particularly demanding today, her gray eyes sharp with criticism as she watched my every move. "Dr. Romano is our most prestigious patient," she had reminded me for the 3rd time this morning, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. "His mother's case requires absolute discretion and impeccable service. The Romano family has been very generous to this hospital." The name had meant nothing to me then. Romano was common enough, especially in a city with such a large Italian-American population. I'd simply nodded, gathered the requested medical files, and prepared to follow my routine. Just another VIP patient in a hospital that catered to the wealthy and powerful. My colleague Jenny, a chatty radiology tech with kind eyes, had tried to engage me in conversation earlier. "You okay, Sarah? You've been even quieter than usual." I'd managed a weak smile, deflecting as I always did. Jenny was the closest thing I had to a friend here, but even she knew nothing about my real past, about the life I'd fled from 18 months ago. The private wing of the hospital felt different from the rest of the building. Quieter, more luxurious, with actual artwork on the walls instead of generic medical posters. Real hardwood floors instead of linoleum. The air itself seemed heavier here, weighted with money and influence. I'd only been to this section twice before, both times to deliver files to other wealthy patients who demanded privacy above all else. Room 312 stood at the end of the corridor, its heavy oak door slightly ajar. I could hear voices inside. A woman's weak cough, the rustle of papers, and underneath it all, a man's voice giving quiet instructions. Something about that voice made my chest tighten, though I couldn't place why. It was probably just my pregnancy hormones making me more sensitive to everything. I knocked softly before entering, my standard greeting already forming on my lips. "Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Mitchell from Dr. Peterson's office. I have the files you requested." The elderly woman in the bed looked fragile against the expensive white linens, her silver hair spread across silk pillowcases. Her eyes were kind, but tired, and she managed a gentle smile as I approached. "Oh, how sweet of you, dear." But it was the man standing beside her bed who made my world tilt on its axis. Salvatore Romano turned from the window where he'd been standing, and our eyes met across the space of 18 months and 1,000 unspoken words. Time seemed to fracture, splitting into before and after, into the woman I'd been and the woman I'd become. He looked exactly the same, tall, imposing, with those dark eyes that had once looked at me with such passion. His black hair was perhaps slightly shorter, and there was a new hardness around his mouth. But he was unmistakably Sal. My carefully constructed new life crumbled in that single moment of recognition. The files slipped from my numb fingers, scattering across the polished floor in a cascade of white paper. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Neither of us moved to pick them up. We simply stared at each other across the room. Two people who had once shared everything and now shared nothing but this terrible, electric moment of rediscovery. "Sarah?" Mary Romano's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Dear, are you all right?" I couldn't respond, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there as Sal's gaze moved from my face, down to my loose scrubs, to the subtle changes in my body that pregnancy had brought. I saw the exact moment recognition hit him fully, saw his jaw clench and his hands curl into fists at his sides. I started, then stopped, my voice nothing more than a whisper. I should go. No. The single word from Sal was quiet, but carried absolute authority. The same tone he'd used to run his business, to command respect, to control every situation he encountered. Stay. We need to talk. I'm working, I managed, my professional training kicking in even as my personal world collapsed. I have other patients to see. The files, Mary said gently, gesturing to the scattered papers on the floor. I dropped to my knees, gathering the documents with shaking hands. Sal moved to help, his fingers brushing mine as we both reached for the same page. The contact sent electricity shooting up my arm. The same spark that had once ignited passion between us now burning with entirely different emotions. You changed your name, he said quietly, too quietly for his mother to hear. I had to, I replied, not looking at him. From everyone, or just from me? The question hung between us, loaded with hurt and accusation. I stood up with the files clutched to my chest like a shield, finally meeting his eyes again. Does it matter? His mother was watching us with growing confusion and concern. Salvatore, do you know this young woman? The silence stretched too long. I could see Sal weighing his options, calculating as he always did. Finally, he spoke. This is Sarah Mitchell, Mama. An old friend from before. An old friend. The words were like a slap across my face, reducing everything we'd been to nothing more than a casual acquaintance. But perhaps that was for the best. Perhaps it was easier this way. How lovely, Mary said, though her eyes remained troubled. Any friend of Salvatore's is welcome here. I forced myself to smile, to play the part. I should get these files organized for you. Dr. Peterson will want to review the test results. Of course, Sal said, his tone carefully neutral now. But perhaps you could spare a few more minutes. My mother has been asking about her treatment options. It wasn't a request, despite the polite phrasing. It was a command wrapped in civility, the kind of subtle manipulation Sal had always excelled at. He wanted me to stay, and he would find a way to make it happen, regardless of my wishes. I looked at Mary, who did indeed seem eager to discuss her condition. As a cardiologist, I could see the signs even without reviewing her chart, the slight blue tinge to her lips, the way she shifted to ease breathing, the careful way she moved to avoid exertion. Whatever was wrong with her heart was serious. Of course, I heard myself saying. I'd be happy to help explain anything about your care. Sal's eyes never left my face as I moved closer to his mother's bedside, carefully maintaining professional distance. But I could feel the weight of his gaze, could sense the questions building behind his controlled exterior. He would want answers, about why I'd left, where I'd been, and most importantly, about the life growing inside me. As I began to review Mary's chart, pointing out various test results, and explaining medical terminology in language she could understand, I was hyper-aware of Sal's presence behind me. The familiar scent of his cologne, the way he moved with predatory grace even in this sterile medical environment, the soft sound of his breathing that I'd once found so comforting. Mary asked intelligent questions about her condition, clearly wanting to understand every aspect of her treatment. I found myself genuinely engaged with her care, my medical training overriding the emotional turmoil of seeing Sal again. It was easier to focus on medicine than on the memories threatening to overwhelm me. You seem very knowledgeable about cardiac care, Mary observed. Are you studying to be a doctor? I hesitated, aware of Sal's sharp attention to my answer. I have some medical background, I said carefully. I like to stay informed about patient care. She's being modest, Mama, Sal said softly. Sarah has always been exceptionally intelligent. The past tense stung. Had been. As if the woman he'd known no longer existed. Perhaps she didn't. Perhaps Sarah Mitchell, medical assistant and expectant mother, was all that remained of the woman who had once loved Salvatore Romano with every fiber of her being. As I prepared to leave, organizing the files one final time, Sal moved closer. Close enough that only I could hear his next words. "We're not finished, Sarah," he said quietly. "Not by a long shot." I looked up at him, seeing not the passionate man I'd once loved, but the dangerous stranger he'd become in my absence. "Yes," I whispered back. "We are." But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't true. With Sal, nothing was ever truly finished. And as I walked toward the door, I could feel him watching me, calculating, planning whatever came next. I was no longer anonymous, no longer safe. The carefully constructed new life I'd built was already beginning to crumble, and I had no idea how to protect either myself or my unborn child from whatever storm was about to break over us. The game had begun again, whether I wanted to play or not. The next morning arrived with the kind of false normalcy that made my skin crawl. I dressed for work in my usual scrubs, braided my hair back, and tried to pretend that seeing Sal yesterday had been nothing more than a strange dream. But my hands shook as I applied concealer under my eyes, and the woman staring back at me from the bathroom mirror looked haunted. I'd barely slept, my mind racing through every possible scenario. Would he be there again today? Would he have left town, dismissing our encounter as irrelevant to his current life? Or worse, would he have investigated me already, uncovered the new identity I'd worked so hard to build? Jenny was waiting by the nurse's station when I arrived, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by something that looked almost like pity. "Sarah, honey, Margaret wants to see you in her office, first thing." My blood turned to ice. Margaret Walsh never called staff meetings this early, unless something was seriously wrong. I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral as I made my way to her office, but my heart was already pounding against my ribs. Margaret looked up from her computer screen as I knocked, her gray eyes unreadable behind her wire-rimmed glasses. "Sarah, please sit down." I perched on the edge of the chair across from her desk, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. "Is everything all right?" "That depends," she said slowly, studying my face with uncomfortable intensity. "I received a very interesting phone call this morning, from someone claiming to be a concerned family member asking about your qualifications and background." The room seemed to tilt. Sal. Of course he'd already started investigating. I should have expected it. He'd never been one to leave loose ends untied. "I don't understand," I managed. "The caller seemed particularly interested in your medical credentials. Wanted to know if you were qualified to be discussing cardiac treatment options with patients." Margaret leaned back in her chair. I assured him that all our staff members are properly credentialed for their positions, but it got me thinking. You do seem unusually knowledgeable about medical procedures for someone with your job title. I forced myself to meet her gaze. I've always been interested in medicine. I read a lot, attend training seminars when I can afford them. Margaret's expression remained skeptical. "Well, regardless of your enthusiastic approach to patient care, I'm afraid I have to make some changes to your assignment. You're being moved to the pediatric wing, effective immediately." "What? But why?" The question burst out before I could stop it. "Hospital policy. We can't have staff members who might have personal connections to VIP patients. It creates complications we simply can't afford." She shuffled some papers on her desk, not quite meeting my eyes. "I'm sure you understand. Personal connections." So Sal had made it clear that he knew me, without revealing exactly how. Probably painted it as a casual acquaintance that might compromise my objectivity. It was a masterful move, removing me from his mother's care while making it seem like standard hospital protocol. Of course, I said quietly. I understand completely. Good. Report to Dr. Martinez in pediatrics after lunch. He'll brief you on your new responsibilities. Margaret's tone softened slightly. Sarah, I hope you know that your work here has been excellent. This isn't a reflection on your performance. I nodded and left her office, my mind reeling. The pediatric wing was on the opposite side of the hospital from the VIP suites. Sal had effectively cut off my access to information about his mother's condition, while simultaneously demonstrating just how far his influence reached. Even here, in this place where I'd thought I was safe, he could manipulate the situation to his advantage. The morning passed in a blur of routine tasks. I tried to focus on my work, but every time someone walked past in the corridor, every time the phone rang, I found myself tensing, waiting for Sal to appear. He was playing with me, I realized, letting me know that he was in control, that he could reach me whenever and wherever he chose. During my lunch break, I sat in the hospital cafeteria picking at a sandwich I couldn't taste when a shadow fell across my table. I looked up to find a woman I'd never seen before, tall, elegant, with sleek black hair and designer clothes that probably cost more than I made in a month. Mind if I sit? She asked, though she was already pulling out the chair across from me. I'm sorry. Do we know each other? Not yet. I'm Elena Torino. She settled into her seat with predatory grace, her dark eyes studying my face with uncomfortable intensity. I believe you know my fiancé. Fiancé. The word hit me like a physical blow, though I tried not to let the reaction show on my face. Of course Sal had moved on. Of course he'd found someone suitable, someone who fit into his world in ways I never could have. I think you have me confused with someone else, I said carefully. Elena smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, I don't think so. You see, Sal tells me everything. Well, almost everything. He mentioned running into an old friend yesterday, someone from his past who'd apparently fallen on hard times. Her gaze dropped meaningfully to my scrubs, then back to my face. Imagine my surprise when I realized who that friend might be. I started to stand up, but Elena's hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. Sit down, Sarah. We need to have a conversation. The use of my name, my real name, made my blood run cold. I sank back into my chair, realizing that any pretense of anonymity was pointless now. What do you want? I asked quietly. To understand why my fiancé came home last night distracted and upset for the first time in months. To figure out what kind of threat you might pose to the life we're building together. Elena's grip on my wrist tightened. You see, I know all about your relationship with Sal, how deeply he cared for you, how devastated he was when you disappeared. That was a long time ago, I said, trying to pull my hand free. Was it? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like yesterday's news is becoming today's problem. Elena finally released my wrist, but her eyes never left my face. Tell me something, Sarah. That baby you're carrying, is it his? The question hung between us like a loaded gun. I could see the calculation in Elena's eyes, the way she was weighing possibilities, assessing threats. This woman was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with physical violence. She was smart, connected, and completely ruthless when it came to protecting what she saw as hers. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, but my voice betrayed me with its slight tremor. Oh, please, I'm not blind. 16 weeks along, I'd guess, based on how you're carrying. Which means... She paused, doing the math. Conceived right around the time you disappeared. How interesting. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I have to get back to work. Of course you do. But Sarah... Elena's voice stopped me as I turned to leave. If you're thinking about reaching out to Sal, about trying to rekindle whatever you two had, I'd reconsider. Sal is building something important now, something bigger than his old life. He doesn't need distractions from the past. I have no intention of reaching out to anyone, I said over my shoulder. Good. Because it would be a shame if something happened to compromise your comfortable new life here. Hospital jobs can be so precarious, can't they? And single mothers need all the stability they can get. The threat was clear, wrapped in silk but sharp as a blade. I walked away without responding, but I could feel Elena's eyes boring into my back until I disappeared around the corner. The afternoon in pediatrics passed in a haze of automatic responses and forced smiles. Dr. Martinez was kind but busy, showing me around the ward and explaining my new duties without seeming to notice my distraction. The children were sweet, their innocence a stark contrast to the dark games being played around me, but even their laughter couldn't shake the sense of walls closing in. I was restocking supply closets when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dinner. 8 p.m. Torino's on 5th Street. Come alone. My hands trembled as I stared at the message. No signature, but I knew who it was from. Sal had waited exactly 1 day to make his move, letting me stew in uncertainty before issuing his summons. Because that's what it was. Not an invitation, but a command disguised as a request. I wanted to ignore it. Wanted to delete the message and pretend this whole nightmare would somehow resolve itself. But I knew Sal too well. He would escalate until he got what he wanted, and innocent people might get caught in the crossfire. His mother was sick, possibly dying, and seeing me again had clearly stirred up emotions he thought he'd buried. Another text arrived moments later. We need to talk about our situation. All of it. Our situation. As if the pregnancy was something we'd planned together. A mutual responsibility rather than the consequence of my own poor judgment and desperate loneliness. I thought about Elena's threats, about Margaret's sudden change in my assignment, about the careful life I'd built crumbling around me. I typed back, I can't. I'm working. The response came immediately. Not anymore. You called in sick for tomorrow. Food poisoning. I stared at the phone in disbelief. He'd already called in sick for me, had somehow gotten access to the hospital's scheduling system, or convinced someone to make the call on my behalf. The demonstration of power was casual but absolute. He could manipulate my job, my schedule, my entire life with nothing more than a phone call. My phone buzzed again. Don't make me come find you, Sarah. It's better for everyone if we handle this privately. The implied threat was clear. If I didn't come willingly, he would escalate. He would show up at my apartment, at my workplace, wherever he needed to go to get my attention. And Elena had already made it clear that my presence was seen as a threat to their carefully constructed life. I found myself typing, fine. But this doesn't change anything. Everything has already changed. You made sure of that when you ran. I turned off my phone and shoved it into my locker, my hands shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. Sal was pulling me back into his world whether I wanted to go or not, using the same combination of subtle manipulation and barely veiled threats that had once seemed so protective and now felt like a cage closing around me. As I finished my shift and prepared to leave the hospital, I caught sight of a familiar figure near the elevator bank. Vincent Torino, Elena's older brother, and one of Sal's most trusted associates, was standing casually by the wall, reading a newspaper. But his eyes tracked my movement across the lobby, and when our gazes met, he gave me a small, cold smile. Message received. I was being watched. My movements were being monitored. Even here, in what I'd thought was my sanctuary, Sal's people had eyes and ears. The web was tightening around me, and I was running out of ways to escape. As I walked to my car in the parking garage, checking over my shoulder for shadows that might or might not be there, I realized that the game Sal was playing had rules I'd never fully understood. But I was no longer the naive woman who had run away 18 months ago. I was carrying a child now, and that changed everything. I would go to dinner. I would listen to what he had to say. but I would not be manipulated into giving up the independence I'd fought so hard to achieve. Whatever Sal wanted from me, whatever he thought our situation entitled him to, he was going to discover that Sarah Mitchell was not the same woman as the one who had fled his world in terror and heartbreak. The question was whether that would make things better or infinitely worse. Torino's on 5th Street was exactly the kind of restaurant I'd expected. Dimly lit, expensive, with the sort of understated elegance that screamed old money and older secrets. The maitre d' took one look at me in my simple black dress and seemed to know exactly who I was there to see, guiding me through the maze of white tablecloths and crystal glasses to a private booth in the back. Sal was already waiting, his dark suit impeccable as always, a glass of what looked like expensive whiskey sitting untouched in front of him. He stood when he saw me approaching, the gesture so automatic and ingrained that I knew he wasn't even conscious of doing it. Some habits from our past, it seemed, died harder than others. Sarah. His voice was carefully neutral, but I caught the slight tension around his eyes as his gaze swept over me. I'd chosen the dress deliberately. Black, fitted enough to make my pregnancy unmistakable, but elegant enough that I wouldn't look out of place in his world. If we were going to have this conversation, I wanted him to see exactly what he was dealing with. Sal. I slid into the booth across from him, noting how he'd positioned himself so he could see the entire restaurant, his back to the wall. Old habits indeed. The silence stretched between us, heavy with 18 months of unspoken words and unresolved hurt. Finally, Sal gestured to the menu lying closed beside my place setting. "Order something. You're eating for 2 now." The casual reference to my pregnancy made my stomach clench. "I'm not hungry." "You're too thin," he said, his tone taking on that edge of concern that had once made me feel cherished and now just made me feel trapped. "When was the last time you had a proper meal? That's not your concern anymore, isn't it?" His dark eyes locked with mine, and I saw something flicker there that looked almost like pain. "You're carrying my child, Sarah. That makes it very much my concern." There it was, out in the open. The assumption I'd been dreading, the conclusion I'd known he would draw. I could deny it, but we both knew the math. 16 weeks pregnant, and I'd left his bed 18 weeks ago after that last desperate night, when I'd thought I could somehow make him choose me over his world. "You don't know that," I said quietly. "Don't I?" He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper that had once made me shiver with anticipation. "Tell me, Sarah, have there been other men since you ran away? Other lovers who might be responsible for the child you're carrying?" The question hung between us like a challenge. I wanted to lie, wanted to claim that I'd moved on, found someone else, built a life that didn't revolve around the memory of his touch. But the truth was written in my silence, in the way I couldn't quite meet his eyes. "That's what I thought," he said, sitting back with something that might have been satisfaction. The waiter appeared as if summoned, taking our orders with the kind of professional discretion that came from working in a restaurant that catered to people who valued privacy above all else. Sal ordered for both of us, the grilled salmon for me, claiming I needed the omega-3s, and the osso buco for himself. I didn't protest. "Pick your battles," I reminded myself. When we were alone again, Sal reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, setting it on the table between us. Sarah Elizabeth Chen, born in San Francisco, graduated summa cum laude from UCSF Medical School, completed her cardiology residency at Johns Hopkins, published several papers on innovative cardiac surgery techniques, licensed to practice medicine in California, Maryland, and New York. My blood turned to ice as he recited my real credentials, my actual accomplishments, the life I'd worked so hard to leave behind. "How did you really thought I wouldn't investigate? You disappeared from my life without a trace. And then you show up 18 months later working as a medical assistant under a false name. pregnant with what I'm fairly certain is my child. His voice remained calm, but I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. Did you honestly believe I would just let that go? I stared at the envelope, knowing it probably contained every detail of my life from birth to yesterday. It doesn't matter what you found. That person doesn't exist anymore. Doesn't she? Sal opened the envelope and pulled out a photograph. Me in my residency whites, standing beside Dr. Harrison after we'd successfully completed a complex valve replacement. I looked confident, accomplished, alive in ways I'd forgotten I could be. This is who you really are, Sarah. A brilliant surgeon who threw away everything she'd worked for to hide from me. I didn't throw anything away, I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. I made a choice. Because of what happened that night, because of what I told you about Vincent and the Romano family business. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You left because you couldn't handle the truth about my world. The memories crashed over me like a tidal wave. That last night in his penthouse, when I'd finally worked up the courage to tell him I loved him, to ask him to leave his family's organization and start fresh with me. The way his face had gone cold when I'd mentioned Vincent's activities, the casual violence I'd witnessed, the fear that had been growing in my chest every day we were together. You told me I would never be safe, I whispered. That loving you meant accepting that I would always be a target, that any children we had would grow up in that shadow. You said I was naive to think we could have a normal life. I was protecting you. You were pushing me away. The words came out more bitter than I'd intended. You made it clear that I would never be more than a liability to you, something to be managed and contained rather than cherished. Sal was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table in a rhythm I remembered from when he was thinking through a particularly complex problem. And so you ran, in the middle of the night, without a word, like I meant nothing to you. You meant everything to me. That was the problem. I touched my belly instinctively, feeling the slight swell beneath my dress. And this child will mean everything to me too. Which is why I won't let you destroy its life the way you almost destroyed mine. Destroy? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. I gave you everything, Sarah. Protection, security, a place in my world that no one else has ever had. You gave me a gilded cage. Beautiful, comfortable, but still a cage. Our food arrived, interrupting the charged atmosphere between us. I picked at the salmon while Sal ate mechanically, both of us lost in memories we'd tried to bury. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation around us, but our little corner felt isolated, as if we existed in a bubble where the outside world couldn't intrude. What do you want from me, Sal? I asked finally. I want you to come home. The simple statement hit me like a physical blow. That's not my home anymore. It never stopped being your home. Your things are still in the penthouse, exactly as you left them. I never had them removed. His voice softened slightly. I kept hoping you'd come back. I can't. You know I can't. Because of Elena. He seemed to read the answer in my expression. She told me about your conversation today. She was concerned about your sudden reappearance. Your fiancé has nothing to worry about. I'm not here to disrupt your life. My fiancé, he repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. Is that what she told you she was? Something in his tone made me look up sharply. Isn't she? Elena Torino is a business arrangement, an alliance between families that benefits both sides. Vincent wanted a closer connection to our organization, and my mother wanted me to settle down with someone appropriate. His lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. There's no love involved, Sarah. There never has been. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. All of Elena's threats, her claims about their life together, the future they were building, All of it had been manipulation designed to make me disappear quietly. But she said, "Elena says a lot of things. She's ambitious, intelligent, and absolutely ruthless when it comes to protecting what she sees as hers. The fact that she sought you out today tells me she sees you as a threat to her plans." Sal leaned forward, his eyes intense. "She's not wrong. I'm not a threat to anyone. I just want to be left alone." "That's not possible anymore. You're carrying my child, Sarah. My heir. Do you have any idea what that means in my world?" The weight of his words settled over me like a shroud. I'd been so focused on escaping Sal's influence that I'd never fully considered what it would mean to bear his child. In his world, bloodline meant everything. Legacy was power. And I was carrying the next generation of the Romano family. "The baby doesn't have to be part of your world," I said desperately. "We can keep it secret. I'll raise it quietly, away from all of this." "And what? Let my child grow up believing its father abandoned it? Let it struggle financially while I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Sal shook his head. "You're asking me to pretend my own flesh and blood doesn't exist. I'm asking you to let us be free. Freedom is an illusion, Sarah. You've learned that already, or you wouldn't have been hiding under a false name in a city 3,000 miles from your real life." His voice gentled slightly. "But protection, security, the ability to provide for your child, those things are real, and I can give them to you." "At what cost?" "Come back to me. Marry me. Give our child the legitimacy and protection of the Romano name." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing against mine. "Be my wife, not my arrangement." The proposal hit me like a physical blow. I jerked my hand back, my heart racing. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." "You're engaged to Elena. You just told me it was a business arrangement, but it's still a commitment. Your family, her family, they're expecting a wedding. Plans change. Arrangements can be renegotiated." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. "Elena will understand that circumstances have evolved. And if she doesn't, then she'll learn to." The casual menace in his voice reminded me exactly who I was dealing with. This wasn't just Sal, the man I'd once loved. This was Salvatore Romano, head of one of the most powerful crime families on the East Coast. I pushed back from the table, suddenly desperate for air. "I need to think." "Of course." But as I started to stand, his hand closed around my wrist, gentle but implacable. "But Sarah, don't take too long. The longer you wait, the more complicated this situation becomes." "Is that a threat?" "It's reality. There are people in my world who would see your child as either a valuable asset or a dangerous liability. I prefer to ensure it's seen as the former." His thumb stroked across my pulse point, a gesture that once would have comforted me and now just reminded me how easily he could feel the fear racing through my veins. "I'm offering you protection, but protection requires proximity." I pulled free of his grasp and gathered my purse, my mind reeling. "I'll call you." "You will, because despite everything that's happened between us, you're not stupid. You know what's at stake here." He stood as I prepared to leave, ever the gentleman even in the midst of what was essentially an elegant kidnapping negotiation. "And Sarah, next time we meet, it won't be in public. We have too much to discuss for the constraints of polite society." I left the restaurant feeling like I was walking through a minefield. Every step could trigger an explosion that would destroy the careful life I'd built. But as I drove home through the city streets, I couldn't shake the memory of how Sal's eyes had softened when he'd talked about our child. The mixture of possessiveness and something that looked almost like wonder. He wanted to marry me. Not for love. I wasn't naive enough to believe that love had survived 18 months of silence and betrayal. But for the child, for legacy, for the complicated mix of responsibility and ownership that drove men like him. The question was whether I was strong enough to resist him again, or if this time he would find a way to make the cage so beautiful that I wouldn't even realize I was trapped inside it. As I pulled into my apartment complex parking lot, I noticed a familiar black sedan parked across the street. Vincent Torino sat behind the wheel, not bothering to hide his surveillance. The message was clear. I was being watched. My movements were being tracked. Whether I realized it or not, I was already back in Sal's world. The only question now was whether I would enter it willingly or be dragged in kicking and screaming. Either way, I was no longer free to pretend this was a choice I could avoid making. 3 days passed before Sal made his next move. 3 days during which I tried to convince myself that I could still find a way out of this impossible situation. I went to work in pediatrics, smiled at the children, filed reports, and pretended that my world wasn't slowly unraveling. But Vincent's black sedan appeared everywhere I went. Parked outside the hospital, idling near my grocery store, sitting across from my apartment building like a dark omen. On Thursday morning, Margaret called me into her office again. This time, her expression was genuinely concerned rather than merely professional. "Sarah, I'm afraid I have some difficult news. There's been a complaint filed against you with the state medical board." My blood turned to ice. What kind of complaint? "Someone has alleged that you've been practicing medicine without proper credentials, specifically that you provided cardiac consultation to a patient while misrepresenting your qualifications." Margaret removed her glasses and rubbed her temples. "The complaint claims you diagnosed and recommended treatment protocols beyond your scope of practice." I stared at her, my mind racing. Mary Romano. Someone had twisted my conversation with Sal's mother, made it seem like I'd overstepped my bounds as a medical assistant. That's not true. I never diagnosed anything. I simply explained test results that were already available. "I believe you. But the medical board has to investigate. Until this is resolved, I'm afraid I have to place you on administrative leave." Margaret's voice was genuinely sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I know how much you need this job." Administrative leave. Without pay, of course. Just like that, my source of income was gone, my carefully constructed independence crumbling. I walked out of the hospital in a daze, my mind trying to process how quickly everything was falling apart. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. "I'm sorry it came to this. Meet me at the marina, Pier 17. We need to finish our conversation." I stared at the message, understanding flooding through me like ice water. Sal had orchestrated this. The complaint, the investigation, my suspension, all of it designed to strip away my options, to make me desperate enough to accept his offer. I drove to the marina in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. The afternoon sun glittered off the water, sailboats and yachts bobbing gently in their slips like expensive toys. I found Sal standing at the end of Pier 17, his dark hair catching the breeze, his expensive suit looking perfectly at home among the million-dollar boats. "You bastard," I said without preamble as I approached. He turned, and I saw something that might have been regret flicker across his features. I tried to do this the easy way. By destroying my career? By taking away everything I've worked for? By showing you that the independence you think you have is an illusion. His voice was calm, reasonable, which somehow made it worse. "You were never safe, Sarah. You were never truly free. You were just temporarily overlooked. I was building a life. You were hiding. There's a difference." He stepped closer, and I caught that familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something indefinably masculine that had once made me feel safe, and now just reminded me how trapped I was. "The medical board complaint will be withdrawn as soon as you accept my protection. Your job will be restored, your record cleared. Or you'll destroy everything I've built. I'll make sure you understand that what you've built was never real to begin with." His eyes softened slightly. I don't want to hurt you, Sarah. I never wanted to hurt you. But I won't let you raise my child in poverty and anonymity when I can give both of you everything. This isn't about the baby. This is about control. Everything is about control. He reached out, his fingers brushing against my cheek with heartbreaking gentleness. The question is whether you'll let me control your circumstances, or if you'll force me to control your choices. I jerked away from his touch. Those are the same thing. No, they're not. One allows you dignity, the other. He shrugged, the gesture elegant and terrifying in its casualness. Behind him, I could see a massive yacht moored at the end of the pier, all gleaming white fiberglass and tinted windows. It looked like something from a movie, the kind of vessel that screamed wealth and power. Is that yours? I asked, needing to focus on something concrete rather than the impossible situation closing around me. It is now. I bought it this morning. Sal followed my gaze, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I thought you might like to see what our life could look like. Our life? Come aboard. Let me show you what I'm offering. Every instinct I had screamed at me to walk away, to get in my car and drive as far as I could. But where would I go? Sal had already demonstrated that his reach extended far beyond what I'd imagined. He could find me anywhere, could dismantle any life I tried to build with a few phone calls. I followed him onto the yacht, my heels clicking against the polished deck. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior, all rich woods and soft leather, crystal glasses and fresh flowers, spaces designed for comfort and luxury. It was beautiful in the way that money could make things beautiful, but it felt like a trap disguised as paradise. The master suite has been prepared for you, Sal said, leading me through the main salon toward a corridor lined with expensive artwork. Your clothes from the penthouse have been brought aboard, along with some new things I thought you might need. My clothes, things I'd left behind 18 months ago, preserved like artifacts from a life I'd tried to forget. You can't just move my belongings around like I'm a doll in a dollhouse. I can do whatever is necessary to protect what's mine. He stopped in front of a door and pushed it open, revealing a bedroom that was larger than my entire apartment. The bed was covered in silk sheets the color of champagne, and through the porthole windows, I could see nothing but endless water. This is kidnapping, I said quietly. This is protection. Elena's family is not happy about the changes in our arrangement. Vincent has been making threats, subtle ones, but threats nonetheless. You're safer here than you would be alone in that apartment. Sal moved to the dresser and opened the top drawer, revealing neat stacks of lingerie that I recognized as mine. Until we can be married and the situation stabilizes, you'll stay here. And if I refuse, then you'll stay here anyway, but you'll be unhappy about it. He turned to face me, his expression deadly serious. I won't let anything happen to you or our child, Sarah. Not again. The again hung between us, heavy with implication. I thought about that last night we'd spent together, the way he'd held me after making love. His arms tight around me, as if he could keep the world at bay through sheer force of will. The way he'd told me I was too precious to lose, too important to risk. What happened to Elena? I asked. Elena has been informed that our arrangement is terminated. She was displeased, but ultimately pragmatic. Vincent, however, sees this as a betrayal of their family's interests. Sal moved to the windows, looking out at the marina beyond. He's made it clear that he considers you a threat to be eliminated. Fear shot through me like ice water. Vincent Torino was not a man who made idle threats. So this is protective custody. This is your new reality, at least until we can neutralize the threat and establish our marriage publicly. He turned back to me, his eyes dark with something that might have been genuine emotion. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you hate feeling trapped. But I won't lose you again. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the silk comforter soft beneath my hands. This isn't love, Sal. This is possession. In my world, they're often the same thing. He sat beside me, careful to maintain distance, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. But I remember what love felt like with you. The way you used to look at me like I was more than just what I do for a living. The way you made me believe I could be better than what I was born to be. And then you pushed me away. Because I was terrified of what loving you meant. Of how vulnerable it made me. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Do you know what it was like? Waking up to find you gone? Finding your engagement ring on the pillow where your head should have been? Engagement ring. I'd forgotten about that. The simple but exquisite diamond he'd given me 6 months into our relationship. I'd left it behind along with everything else, unable to bear taking something that represented promises neither of us had been able to keep. You never asked me to marry you, I said softly. You just assumed I would say yes. Because I was afraid you would say no. The admission seemed to cost him something. I was afraid that asking would force you to confront everything about my life that scared you. So instead you just waited, expected me to figure it out on my own. I expected you to trust me enough to wait until I could make things safe for us. His hand moved toward mine, then stopped just short of touching. I was working on getting out, Sarah, building legitimate businesses, distancing myself from the family operations. It was going to take time, but I was doing it for you. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. You never told me that. Because I couldn't risk the information getting out before I was ready. Because in my world, showing weakness gets you killed. His jaw tightened. Because I'm an idiot who thought I could protect you by keeping you in the dark. We sat in silence for a moment, the yacht rocking gently beneath us. Outside, I could hear the sounds of the marina, seagulls calling, water lapping against hulls, the distant hum of traffic from the shore. It should have been peaceful, but all I could think about was how far we were from land, how isolated I was becoming. What happens now? I asked finally. Now you rest. You eat proper meals. You let me take care of you the way I should have 18 months ago. Sal stood up, straightening his suit jacket. Dr. Martinez will be coming aboard later to check on you and the baby. I want to make sure everything is progressing normally. You contacted my doctor? I contacted the best obstetrician in the city. Dr. Martinez was encouraged to make himself available for house calls. The casual way he said it made it clear that encouragement had probably involved a significant financial incentive. I felt the walls closing in around me, beautiful and comfortable, but walls nonetheless. And if I try to leave? The crew has instructions to ensure your safety at all times. They're very good at their jobs. His smile was gentle but implacable. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Sarah. I'm trying to give you everything you deserve. What I deserve is a choice. What you deserve is to be protected and cherished. The choice is whether you'll let yourself enjoy it. He moved toward the door, then paused. Dinner will be served at 8. I'll have something sent up if you'd prefer to eat alone. But I'd like it if you joined me. After he left, I sat on the bed in the silence of my beautiful prison, my hand resting on my belly where our child was growing. Through the porthole, I could see the city skyline in the distance, close enough to taunt me with the illusion of freedom, far enough away to remind me how thoroughly trapped I was. Sal had won this round, but the game was far from over. He wanted to protect me, to give me luxury and security in exchange for my compliance. But what he didn't understand was that the woman who had run away 18 months ago was not the same woman sitting on this yacht today. I was stronger now, more determined, and I was carrying something more precious than any treasure he could offer. A child who deserved better than to be born into a world of elegant violence and beautiful lies. If Sal thought he could buy my surrender with silk sheets and ocean views, he was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. I would play his game, accept his protection for now, but I would not be the docile prisoner he seemed to expect. The war between us was just beginning, and this time, I would not be the one to run away. 2 weeks aboard the yacht had given me a clearer picture of just how vast Sal's empire had become. What I'd known 18 months ago was nothing compared to what I witnessed now. An endless stream of visitors conducting business in the main salon, phone calls in multiple languages, transactions that moved millions of dollars with casual efficiency. He wasn't just running his family's traditional operations anymore. He'd expanded into legitimate businesses that spanned half the East Coast. Dr. Martinez had pronounced both me and the baby healthy during his weekly visits, though I caught him glancing nervously at the security personnel who shadowed his every move. Even medical professionals weren't immune to Sal's reach, it seemed. My pregnancy was progressing normally. 18 weeks now, the baby's movements becoming more pronounced each day. I'd settled into a routine that might have seemed pleasant to an outside observer. Morning yoga on the deck, afternoons reading in the library Sal had somehow managed to stock with all my favorite authors, evenings dining with him when business allowed. He was unfailingly polite, attentive without being intrusive, giving me space while making it clear that the space was his to give. But I was learning things too. Listening from the library, I'd pieced together more about the threat Vincent posed. His organization had been slowly absorbing smaller families, consolidating power while Sal had been focused on legitimizing his operations. Elena's engagement to Sal had been intended to create an alliance that would have given Vincent access to the Romano shipping routes and financial networks. My reappearance had shattered those plans, and Vincent was not a man who accepted disruption gracefully. On a Thursday morning, I was reading on the deck when I noticed a familiar figure approaching along the pier. Elena Torino walked with the same predatory confidence I remembered, her designer heels clicking against the wooden planks. She was alone, which surprised me. In Sal's world, people rarely traveled without security. I watched her board the yacht, heard the brief exchange with the crew member who met her at the gangway. Within minutes, she was being escorted to where I sat under the deck awning, her dark eyes assessing everything from my casual sundress to the medical texts stacked beside my chair. "Well," she said, settling into the chair across from me without invitation. "You certainly landed on your feet, didn't you?" "Elena." I closed my book, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm surprised to see you here." "Are you?" Sal may have terminated our arrangement, but that doesn't mean I've stopped caring about his well-being. Her smile was sharp as a blade. "And you, my dear, represent a significant threat to that well-being. I'm not threatening anyone. Aren't you?" Vincent is furious about the broken engagement. He sees it as a personal insult, a betrayal of agreements that took months to negotiate. Elena leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conversational whisper. "He's planning something, Sarah. Something that will hurt Sal where he's most vulnerable." A chill ran down my spine. "What kind of something?" "The kind that involves making certain inconvenient people disappear." Her gaze dropped meaningfully to my belly. "Permanently." Fear shot through me, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because despite everything, I don't want to see Sal destroyed, and losing you and his child would destroy him." Elena's expression softened slightly, revealing something that might have been genuine emotion beneath the calculated exterior. "He loves you, you know. Really loves you, in a way he never could have loved me." The admission hung between us, heavy with implications. "Then why did you try to drive me away?" "Because love makes him weak, makes him vulnerable, makes him the kind of man who might choose his heart over his head." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "But now that Vincent has forced the issue, love might be the only thing that keeps him alive. What do you mean? I mean that you're not just Sal's weakness anymore. You're his strength. The reason he'll fight harder than he ever has before. Elena moved toward the railing, looking out at the water. Vincent underestimates what a man will do to protect his family. He thinks removing you will bring Sal to heal. Instead, it will unleash something he's not prepared to handle. I stood up, my hand instinctively moving to protect my belly. How long do we have? Vincent moves tonight. There's a charity gala at the Meridian Hotel. All the major families will be in attendance. He's planning to make his move when Sal is occupied with public appearances. Elena turned back to me, her expression deadly serious. You need to disappear. Not permanently, but long enough for Sal to deal with Vincent without worrying about your safety. Sal will never agree to that. Then don't tell him. Just go. She pulled a card from her purse, pressing it into my hand. There's a safe house in Connecticut. The address is on the back. Stay there until this is over. I stared at the card, my mind racing. Why are you helping me? Because Vincent killed my brother last year over a territorial dispute. Because he's a rabid dog who needs to be put down before he destroys everything our families have built. Her voice turned cold as winter. And because if you disappear on your own, Sal will assume Vincent took you. That will give him the justification he needs to end this once and for all. The pieces clicked into place. Elena wasn't trying to save me. She was trying to orchestrate Vincent's destruction by making Sal believe I'd been kidnapped. It was ruthless, brilliant, and exactly the kind of manipulation I'd expected from her. What if something goes wrong? What if Sal gets hurt? Then you'll raise his child knowing its father died protecting it. But that's better than raising it in Vincent's world, where weakness is punished and loyalty is bought with fear. Elena headed toward the gangway, then paused. You have 2 hours before Sal leaves for the gala. I suggest you use them wisely. After she left, I sat on the deck trying to process what I'd learned. Vincent was planning to kill me tonight. Elena wanted me to disappear so Sal would have cause to eliminate Vincent. And I was caught in the middle, carrying a child who would either inherit a criminal empire or grow up an orphan. I thought about the safe house address on Elena's card, about the possibility of vanishing again, just when Sal thought he had me secure. Part of me was tempted. The same part that had run away 18 months ago, terrified of the violence that surrounded Sal's world. But I wasn't the same woman who had fled in the night. I was stronger now, more determined, and I refused to let fear make my decisions for me. Instead of packing a bag, I went to find Sal. I discovered him in his office, a space I'd only glimpsed before. It was smaller than I'd expected, lined with books and family photographs, dominated by a massive mahogany desk that had probably belonged to his grandfather. He was on the phone, speaking rapid Italian in a voice that carried unmistakable authority. When he saw me in the doorway, he ended the call abruptly. Sarah? Is everything all right? Elena was here, I said without preamble. She told me about Vincent's plan. Sal's expression went deadly calm, the mask he wore in public sliding into place. What plan? The one where he kills me tonight while you're at the charity gala. I moved into the office, closing the door behind me. She suggested I disappear to a safe house so you'd have justification to eliminate him. For a long moment, Sal said nothing. Then he picked up his phone and began dialing. Marco, I need all security protocols activated immediately. No one gets on or off this yacht without my personal authorization. Sal, I said as he ended the call. We need to talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. You're staying here tonight under maximum security while I deal with Vincent. His voice was clipped, professional, giving nothing away. Running away won't solve this. You're not running away. You're being protected. He stood up, moving to a wall safe I hadn't noticed before. Vincent has made his intentions clear. I won't give him the opportunity to act on them. And what about tomorrow? What about next week, next month? I stepped closer, forcing him to look at me. You can't protect me forever by keeping me locked away. Eventually, we have to face this. There is no we in this situation, Sarah. This is my world, my responsibility, my decision to make. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing an arsenal that made my stomach clench. You are not equipped for this kind of war. But our child will be born into it anyway. That stopped him. His hands stilled on the weapons, his shoulders tensing as the implication hit home. Not if I can help it. You can't protect a child from its own legacy, Sal. This baby will be a Romano whether we like it or not. The question is whether it grows up in a world where problems are solved through violence, or one where they're solved through strength. He turned to face me fully, and I saw something flicker in his dark eyes that might have been hope. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe it's time to stop running from what we are and start fighting for what we could become. I moved closer, close enough to touch him if I chose to. Elena thinks you need justification to move against Vincent. But you don't. You need a partner who understands the stakes and is willing to stand with you. Sarah, you don't understand what you're asking for. I understand perfectly. I'm asking to stop being your weakness and start being your strength. I reached up, touching his face gently. I'm asking you to let me choose this life instead of having it forced on me. The silence stretched between us, heavy with possibility. Finally, Sal covered my hand with his, pressing it against his cheek. If we do this, there's no going back. Once you're part of this world openly, you can never leave it again. I couldn't leave it anyway, not carrying your child. I felt the baby move inside me, as if responding to the tension in the room. But I can choose how I enter it. Vincent will see you as a legitimate target. Vincent already sees me as a target. The difference is whether I face him as your prisoner or as your partner. I stepped back, squaring my shoulders. What's it going to be, Sal? Are you going to keep me locked away like a guilty secret? Or are you going to show your world that I'm something worth protecting? For a moment I thought he would refuse, would insist on keeping me safely contained while he handled Vincent alone. But then something shifted in his expression, a hardness that reminded me exactly who I was dealing with. If we do this, we do it my way. Completely. I wouldn't expect anything else. You'll wear what I choose. Go where I say. Follow my lead in everything. His voice took on that edge of command that had once thrilled and terrified me. And if at any point I tell you to run, you run. No questions, no arguments. Agreed. Then we'd better get you ready for a gala. Sal moved to his desk, pressing a button that I hadn't noticed before. Because tonight, Sarah Mitchell disappears forever, and Sarah Romano makes her debut. As footsteps approached in the corridor outside, I realized that I'd just crossed a line I could never uncross. I was no longer Sal's captive or his weakness. I was about to become his weapon, his partner, his equal in a world where equality was earned through blood and maintained through strength. The woman who had run away 18 months ago was truly dead now. What emerged from her ashes would be something entirely new, something dangerous enough to stand beside Salvatore Romano and strong enough to protect the future we were building together. The war with Vincent was about to begin, and this time, I would not be hiding in the shadows waiting for someone else to determine my fate. This time, I would be fighting for it. The Meridian Hotel glittered like a jewel against the night sky, its grand ballroom filled with the cream of society. Politicians, business leaders, and families whose wealth stretched back generations. What the legitimate guests didn't realize was that half the room was connected to organizations that operated in shadows. Their charitable donations, merely another form of laundering reputation along with money. I stood before the full-length mirror in Sal's penthouse, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. The dress he'd chosen was midnight blue silk that skimmed my body like water, cut to accommodate my pregnancy while still looking devastatingly elegant. Diamonds sparkled at my throat and ears. Real ones. Family heirlooms that marked me as unmistakably his. My hair was swept up in an elaborate chignon that had taken his stylist 2 hours to perfect. "You look magnificent," Sal said from the doorway, his own appearance flawless in a tailored tuxedo that emphasized his powerful frame. But it was the expression in his eyes that took my breath away. Pride, possession, and something deeper that he'd never allowed himself to show before. "I look like someone else entirely. You look like yourself. The woman you were always meant to be." He moved behind me, his hands settling on my shoulders as we both gazed into the mirror. "Are you ready for this?" "No, but I'm going anyway." I leaned back against his chest, drawing strength from his solid presence. "What's the plan?" "Vincent will make his move during the auction portion of the evening. It's the only time when the crowd will be distracted enough for him to act without causing a scene." Sal's hands tightened slightly on my shoulders. "We'll be surrounded by security, but they'll be discreet. To everyone else, you'll appear vulnerable." Bait. Insurance. Vincent thinks he's hunting prey. He doesn't realize he's walking into a trap. Sal turned me to face him, his dark eyes intense. "The moment you feel unsafe, the moment anything seems wrong, you signal Marco. He'll be stationed by the east exit." I nodded, trying to memorize the details he'd drilled into me over the past hours. Exit routes, security positions, code words that would trigger immediate evacuation protocols. It was like learning choreography for a deadly dance. "What about Elena?" "Elena will be there with her new escort, a businessman from Chicago who has no idea what he's walking into." Sal's smile was sharp as a blade. "She'll provide the perfect distraction when Vincent makes his move." The drive to the hotel was silent, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Through the bulletproof windows of Sal's Mercedes, the city looked normal, peaceful, giving no hint of the violence that might erupt before the night was over. Sal's security team followed in 2 separate vehicles, their presence both comforting and ominous. As we pulled up to the hotel's grand entrance, I saw the red carpet lined with photographers and society reporters. "They'll want pictures," I said, suddenly nervous. "Let them take pictures. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know exactly who you are and what you mean to me." Sal squeezed my hand gently. "Remember, from this moment on, you're not hiding anymore. You're announcing yourself to the world." The camera flashes were blinding as we stepped out of the car, Sal's hand firmly on my back as we walked up the red carpet. I heard whispered questions from reporters. Who was the mystery woman? Was this Salvatore Romano's new girlfriend? What about his engagement to Elena Torino? I kept my expression serene, following Sal's lead as he stopped for a few select photographs. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere was electric with wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers cast everything in golden light, and the charity auction items, artwork, jewelry, exotic vacations, were displayed like museum pieces. I recognized faces from newspaper society pages, mixed with others whose names never appeared in print, but whose influence was felt throughout the city. Salvatore, and the voice belonged to an elderly man with silver hair and kind eyes. "I was hoping you'd be here tonight. The Children's Hospital Fund is particularly important to me this year." "Dr. Harrison," Sal replied warmly, and my breath caught. It was my former mentor, the surgeon who'd guided me through my residency. "I'd like you to meet Sarah Romano, my fiancée." Dr. Harrison's eyes widened slightly as he took in my appearance, recognition dawning slowly. "Sarah. My God. Is that really you?" His gaze dropped to my rounded belly, then back to my face. "We thought, when you disappeared." "I needed time to figure out my priorities," I said carefully, acutely aware of the ears around us. "Dr. Harrison, this is Salvatore Romano." "A pleasure," Dr. Harrison said, though his expression remained concerned. Sarah was one of our most promising residents. Brilliant surgeon, incredible instincts. He looked between us. I do hope you'll consider returning to medicine once. Once our child is born, Sal finished smoothly. Sarah's talents shouldn't be wasted. We're discussing options for her to complete her residency. The conversation continued for several more minutes, but I was only half listening. Across the room, I'd spotted Vincent Torino near the bar, his pale eyes scanning the crowd with predatory intensity. He looked older than I remembered, his face harder, with new lines around his mouth that spoke of recent stress. Elena stood beside him, radiant in red silk, her arm linked through that of a distinguished-looking man I didn't recognize. But her attention wasn't on her date. It was fixed on Sal and me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "He's here," I murmured to Sal, as Dr. Harrison moved away to speak with other colleagues. "I know. Right on schedule." Sal's hand found mine, his thumb stroking across my knuckles in a gesture that looked loving but felt like reassurance. "The auction begins in 20 minutes. That's when he'll make his move." We circulated through the crowd, Sal introducing me to business associates and family friends with casual possessiveness. Each introduction drove home the same point. I belonged to him now, was under his protection, carried his name and his child. It was a public claiming that left no room for misinterpretation. But I could feel Vincent's eyes on us the entire time, tracking our movements with the patience of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer's voice rang out over the ballroom, "if you could please take your seats, we're ready to begin this evening's auction." The crowd moved toward the arranged seating, conversations continuing in hushed tones as people settled at elaborately decorated tables. Sal guided me to a table near the front, close enough to the stage that we'd be visible to most of the room, but far enough from the exits that escape would require crossing the entire ballroom. Perfect bait positioning. The auction began with smaller items, jewelry, wine collections, weekend getaways to exclusive resorts. Sal bid on a few pieces with casual indifference, his attention seeming focused on the proceedings, but his body language remaining alert to everything happening around us. The next item, the auctioneer announced, is a collection of rare surgical instruments donated by St. Mary's Hospital, perfect for any medical collector or institution. I felt Sal's hand tighten on mine as the bidding began. This was it, the distraction Vincent had been waiting for. Around us, the crowd's attention focused on the stage as the bidding escalated, voices calling out increasingly large amounts. That's when I saw the movement near the service entrance. 3 men in waiters' uniforms, but their movements were wrong, too coordinated, too purposeful. They were spreading out through the room, positioning themselves at key points while everyone else watched the auction. "Sal," I whispered. "I see them." His voice was calm, but I felt the tension coiling in his muscles. "Marco's team is ready." The bidding reached its crescendo. The auctioneer's gavel raised for the final call, when Vincent made his move. He didn't come for me directly. That would have been too obvious, too crude for a man of his sophistication. Instead, he approached our table with a genial smile, Elena and her escort trailing behind him. "Salvatore, how wonderful to see you here." Vincent's voice carried perfectly, drawing attention from nearby tables. And this must be the mysterious Sarah I've heard so much about. "Vincent." Sal's greeting was polite but cold. "I didn't realize you were attending tonight. Oh, I wouldn't miss it. Charity is so important, don't you think?" Vincent's pale eyes fixed on me with predatory interest. "Sarah, isn't it? I feel like we have so much to discuss." "I can't imagine what about," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the fear crawling up my spine. "Well, for instance, your sudden reappearance in Salvatore's life. Your interesting condition." His gaze dropped to my belly with unmistakable threat. The way your presence has disrupted so many carefully laid plans." The ballroom had gone quiet around us, conversation stopping as people sensed the tension crackling between the tables. Even the auctioneer had paused, uncertain whether to continue. "Vincent," Elena said quietly, her hand on his arm. "Perhaps this isn't the place." "Oh, but it's the perfect place." Vincent shrugged off her touch, his attention never leaving me. "Public venues are so much safer for difficult conversations, don't you think, Sarah? So much harder for misunderstandings to occur." Sal started to stand, but Vincent's hand moved to his jacket in a gesture that froze everyone at the table. Around the room, I could see security personnel tensing, hands moving toward concealed weapons. "You see," Vincent continued conversationally, "I've recently learned some interesting information about our dear Sarah here, about her real identity, her medical credentials, her, shall we say, previous relationship with certain federal agencies." The words hit me like physical blows. Federal agencies. He knew something, had discovered some connection I didn't even know existed. But how was that possible? "That's a very serious accusation," Sal said quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Oh, it's not an accusation. It's a fact." Vincent smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Dr. Sarah Chen, formerly of Johns Hopkins, daughter of FBI Assistant Director Robert Chen. Quite the family connection, wouldn't you say?" The ballroom erupted. My father. Vincent had discovered that my father worked for the FBI, had somehow twisted that information into evidence of betrayal. Around us, guests were rising from their tables, conversations exploding as people tried to understand what was happening. But I couldn't process any of it, because Sal had gone absolutely still beside me, his face a mask of shock and something that looked like devastation. "You didn't tell him," Vincent said with satisfaction. "How interesting. I wonder what other secrets you've been keeping, Dr. Chen." "Sarah," Sal's voice was barely audible. "Is it true?" I turned to look at him, seeing my own world crumbling in his dark eyes. "I never told you about my father, because we weren't close. I hadn't spoken to him in years when we met. It doesn't mean anything, doesn't it?" Vincent leaned forward, his voice carrying to the tables around us. "Because according to my sources, Agent Chen has been tracking Romano family operations for the better part of a decade. And isn't it convenient that his daughter suddenly appeared in Salvatore's life just as several federal investigations were heating up?" "That's not true," I said desperately. "I never had anything to do with his work. I didn't even know—" "Enough." Sal's voice cut through my explanation like a blade. When he looked at me, his expression was colder than I'd ever seen it. "We're leaving." He stood up abruptly, his hand closing around my arm with barely controlled force. Around us, the ballroom was in chaos. Security personnel moving through the crowd, guests talking in urgent whispers, photographers capturing everything with professional efficiency. "Sal, please let me explain. Not here. Not now." His grip tightened as he guided me toward the exit, Vincent's laughter following us through the crowd. As we reached the hotel entrance, I caught sight of Elena near the coat check, her expression unreadable. But as our eyes met, she mouthed a single word that made my blood run cold. "Run." The car ride back to the yacht was conducted in absolute silence. Sal stared out the window, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. When I tried to speak, to explain, he held up a hand that stopped me cold. It wasn't until we were back in the yacht's main salon that he finally turned to face me, and the expression in his eyes made me step backward involuntarily. 18 months, he said quietly. 18 months. I blame myself for driving you away. 18 months I thought I'd failed to protect you, failed to give you what you needed. His voice grew softer, more dangerous. When all along, you were exactly where you were supposed to be. Sal, please, you have to listen to me. I never had any contact with my father's work. I didn't even know he was investigating. Your father has been building a RICO case against my family for years. Years, Sarah. And suddenly his daughter appears in my life, gets close to me, learns everything about my operations, and then disappears. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. Tell me, was the pregnancy plan too? Another way to ensure your place in my world? The accusation hit me like a physical blow. How can you even ask me that? Because everything about us has been a lie. His voice broke slightly on the last word, revealing the pain beneath the anger. Everything I felt, everything I thought we shared, it was all part of an investigation. No, that's not true. I love you, Sal. I've always loved you. Love. He laughed, the sound bitter and broken. You want to know what love is, Sarah? Love is what I felt when I thought you'd left because you were afraid of my world. Love is the 18 months I spent trying to become worthy of you, building legitimate businesses, distancing myself from family operations. His eyes filled with something that looked like tears. Love is the hope I felt when you came back, when I thought we could build something real together. We can. We still can. No. He moved to his desk, pressing a button that would summon security. We can't. Because I don't know who you really are anymore. I don't know what's real, and what's been carefully constructed to serve your father's investigation. The baby is real, I said desperately. Whatever else you believe, the baby is real. It's yours. Is it? The question was barely a whisper. Or is that just another lie in a web I'm too blind to see? Security personnel appeared in the doorway, their expressions professionally neutral. Sal didn't look at me as he gave his instructions. Escort Dr. Chen to the marina. Provide her with transportation wherever she wants to go. His voice was dead, emotionless. Make sure she has everything she brought aboard. Sal. Please. Go, Sarah. Before I do something we'll both regret. I wanted to fight, to scream, to force him to listen to the truth. But I could see that Vincent had won. With a few carefully chosen words, he'd destroyed everything we'd tried to build, turned Sal's love into suspicion, and his protection into rejection. As security escorted me from the yacht, my belongings in a single suitcase, I realized that I'd lost everything. My medical career, my safe anonymity, and now Sal himself. Vincent had played us all perfectly, using our love against us to achieve his ultimate goal. But as I climbed into the car that would take me away from the marina, away from the life I'd briefly thought could be mine, I felt something shift inside me. Not defeat, but determination. Vincent might have won this battle, but the war was far from over. I was carrying Sal's child whether he believed it or not, and that child deserved a father who knew the truth. If Sal wouldn't listen to me, I would have to find another way to make him hear. Because love might have made us both vulnerable tonight, but it had also made us both fighters. And this fight was nowhere near finished.